If you're like me, you can't afford to take it to a paint shop. If I had to take my car to a paint shop, I never would. I can't afford to write a $10,000 check to have this car painted and drop it off. But I can't afford $600 to paint it at home.
Our chief engineer spends most of his time in his machine shop, testing his automats over and over again.
Guys, welcome to the first video in a multi-part series on how to paint your car at home on a budget. Now in this series, I think step one is really just to manage expectations. We are painting a car at home, so I don't think it's realistic to expect the kind of quality that you would get from a show level paint job. And that's not what we're going for here. What we're going for is like a factory level, all one color, looks good, wasn't obviously shot in the driveway kind of paint job. We want something that presents well and that we're proud of. And we can definitely do that at home on a budget. And in this video series, I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do that. Now, I think oftentimes as younger builders, we get stuck in the mindset that paint is like unobtainium. Like we can't reach that level. It's so expensive, it's just out of the reach. And I'm 42 years old now, and I've been building cars for 25 years, somewhere around there. And a lot of my time spent in this hobby was riding around in a car that was like mechanically dialed, the suspension was good, it was reliable, it was pretty quick, yada yada, but it kind of looked like a bucket of I shouldn't cuss. It kind of looked like a bucket of crap because I didn't have paint on it. And what I thought I was lacking was the finances to get the paint, but in reality what I was lacking was the knowledge. Now, I'm not saying that I'm the guy that has all the knowledge on how to paint cars. I don't. I'm a fabricator and a mechanic, that's all I am. But I really don't think that these skills are out of reach for what the normal guy can do and expect at home. These things are totally accessible, they're not that expensive, and the skill involved to do it at home is totally doable. You can do this. 90% of that paint is gonna be in the prep work and just really being in the details about this. The more obsessed you are in the details, the better level of paint you're gonna get out of this. So before I keep rambling on, let's go out to the shop. I wanna show you, number one, what car we're painting, where it's at in the process, and also I wanna show you a car that I've painted by myself in the garage before, so you know I'm not full of crap. Let's go take a look. There it is. Now, if you've been on the channel at all, you know this car. This is my 1970 Fastback Mustang. It's a factory 2-barrel 302 automatic car. Now we've got a crate 302 that's rated at 345 horsepower. Not a killer, I know, but it's gonna be great for this car. I got a T5 in it and 370s in the back. Now this, guys, this is not a big race car. This is a take mama to Sonic and get a chili dog car. That's what this is. Cruise around, make it sound good. People gonna look at you. This is your Mustang. This is what this car is for me. Okay, so bodywork, where I'm at. I've replaced that quarter panel, totally cut it off the car. If you're interested in seeing that, I got a couple of videos dedicated just to doing the quarter panel on this car. Go take a look at those. So I got that done. The roof is almost done. I got to pull the paint off of that door over there. Paint has been removed from this door and quarter panel. I have to pull the paint off the hood. There's the hood, shaker hood, of course. And these front fenders need to have the paint pulled off them as well. Now, if you are not familiar with this tool, I'm gonna recommend that you get that way. This thing is such a time saver. Eastwood also makes it. I believe Eastwood calls it the surface conditioning tool. It's a little cheaper at Harbor Freight. I believe it's the same exact tool. All the drums will fit from the Harbor Freight to the Eastwood and everything. Great tool. I was pulling paint off this thing the hard way, and then I bought that thing and boom, I'm not even sweating it. It's so fast. So if you're at this step or at this stage in the game, I can't recommend it enough. Get you one of those. All right, just to prove to you that I know what I'm doing, and I've done this before, here's my 1963.5 Falcon Sprint. Of course, front end's off it right now. Fenders are up on the wall. But just did a new motor, transmission, wiring it. This can be an EFI car. This is my Go Fast car. But anyways, the paint. This is a single stage paint. And I sprayed it with a 25-gallon air compressor in a garage with no filtration. Ended up with a lot of dirt in it, you know, but that's okay because you can sand it out with a single stage paint. You put it on thick and you can fix and cover a lot of sins. This car looks great. It looks every bit as good as it did coming out of the factory, and that's what we're going for. Okay, now there was a hint on the color when we were taking a look at the car in there. I'm going back with factory color on this car, Grabber Blue. Now, it's kind of a rare combo for this car. It's really like a know-nothing car, but it had a Grabber color, so that's kind of rare. I think they only made 4,000 of them like this. Actually, I got the Marti report. Let me look at the number. Okay, here's the Marti report. Let me see. So yeah, 4,353 with this paint code. All right, now let's talk about what I'm going to use to paint. So the car originally came with a single stage paint job in Grabber Blue, and that's what I'm going to paint again. Now I know it's probably not the coolest, most up-to-date thing, but for me, it works. It's easy to spray. I'm familiar with it. So that kind of goes back to managing your expectations. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but I'm going to paint single stage paint because number one, it was good enough in 1970. I just want a car that looks good. I'm not building a showstopper. If I can get 10 years out of this paint, and I know I can, I'm going to be happy with it. It's an indoor car. It sits inside. It's probably not going to be driven that much. So the single stage paint is great for me. So what I went with was Restoration Shop's Custom Shop Series acrylic urethane. Now there's a difference between what types of paint, and I'll get into that later, but we'll just talk about what I'm using to spray this car. Grabber Blue, Restoration Shop. You can get this stuff on Amazon and on eBay. It's not expensive. So it was like $200 for the paint and the hardener, and then I got their matching urethane high build primer to get the thing as flat as I can. High build primer and a acrylic urethane in Grabber Blue. Now let me show you what I'm going to spray all this stuff with. So for the high build primer, that's what this beauty's for. This is a $20 siphon gun from Harbor Freight. I'm not afraid to throw this thing away when I'm done. And because it's a high build primer, I just needed to get on thick. And this was the most reasonable priced gun I could find with a thick tip. It's got a 2.0 millimeter tip in it. It's got a 32 ounce capacity, and it's a siphon gun. They're hard to go wrong, and I paid like $22 for this. So I'm going to squirt this thing and clean it while I use it, you know, because you got to spray it out and then block it and then spray it out. I'll probably use this gun 2 or 3 times to get all the primer, maybe more than that, 2 or 3 times, maybe 5 times to get all the primer on this car. And it doesn't need to go on beautifully. Of course, if it does, it means I'm going to have less work sanding it off, but I just need the primer on the car. That's where this comes from. I would never paint a color or anything that a top coat with this gun. I never would. So a cheap siphon gun for primer, I'm good with that. For the color, I'm going to use my Eastwood Concourse. This isn't even the Concourse Pro. This is just my Eastwood Concourse HVLP gun. I painted the Falcon with this gun, and it worked great. So the Falcon paint job was my first paint job, and when I initially started laying down the paint, there was a steep learning curve, but when I got to the last panels of the car, man, they were coming out great. This gun is not the weak link. I'm the weak link. This is a $200 gun, and it is plenty to paint this car. So Concourse HVLP from Eastwood. They have the Concourse Pro now, which I think is like $220. You can get this gun now for $180. Also, look at the higher end Harbor Freight guns. All these things are straight off the boat in China. If you do some research and look at the painters on YouTube and read the reviews from Harbor Freight and Amazon, a lot of guys are getting really excellent results from these cheap guns. We're only doing this once, right? Maybe twice. We're not professional painters. We're not trying to be professional painters. We're trying to get color on our car and do it at home cheaper than we can do it anywhere else. The other thing that I got here from Harbor Freight is this Gravity Feed spray gun stand. Now, when I painted the Falcon, I used my bench vise, and I would just clamp my gun up in my vise, and it turned into a big hassle. So I figured, oh, next time I do it, I'll just get this. It's like $12 or something, and it holds the gun. See? That's the purpose there. It holds it up in place so you can service it and change them out. Now, the only thing I don't have here that I want to show you is there is a cup system that fits onto the top of the gun here, where it's like a bag, and then when you pull it out, your cup isn't trashed, you just trash the bag. I think I'm going to switch over to that for this. That may be an additional expense, but of course, you know, that's not required. All you really need to do is clean your cup after you spray out. Okay, so you do have a lot of options when you choose to paint your car. Now, I mentioned that I went with a urethane based paint, acrylic urethane. You also do have a choice of an enamel. Now, forgive me, like I told you earlier, I'm not a professional, so I have notes here, and I'm going to be referring to them from time to time. So the urethane based paints are more expensive, but they're also tougher and more durable in the long term, and that's why I chose a urethane-based paint. Now, the enamel, I understand it's easier to get a better finish from. They dry flatter and shinier typically, but they're not as hard and a little bit softer and the long-term durability on that paint is less desirable than the acrylic urethane. That's why I went with the acrylic urethane. It just made more sense to me. Pay a little bit more money up front to have a harder dried paint. That just made more sense to me. Now, another option you have is a double stage paint. So where you lay the base coat and then you cover it with the clear coat. Now, I just want to be clear, I have zero experience shooting a two-stage paint. My dad's doing it on his Mustang, and he says it's not a big deal. You just have to have the appropriate size tips for and hardener and everything for temperatures, and the appropriate size tips for the base and the clear. It's just basically like doing everything twice. But if you want more information on a double stage paint, search around YouTube. There are tons of information. Now the price is going to go up with that. Again, keeping the cost low, we're sticking with a single stage paint on the Mustang. So one thing that is absolutely worth mentioning is that I'm making this video from the perspective of a guy that's already that builds cars, who has tools such as an air compressor and things of that nature. Now that could be one of the biggest expenses you're up against if you have no tools and you're not prepared. You need to buy a big enough air compressor to continually run a gun. Now I've got a big Cobalt 60-gallon air compressor that is more than enough to keep up with an HVLP, and even the these are air hogs, siphon guns. They chew up a lot of air, but a big 60-gallon air compressor is plenty to keep up with that. Now, you don't really need that big of an air compressor. I painted the Falcon with a smaller, like a 25-gallon air compressor, but I did have a slave tank hooked up to it that kind of increased the capacity, but the compressor itself would turn on quite a bit during the painting. The key there is that you need to have enough pressure available to keep the coat wet. And I'll explain this later when we start painting cars, like what the wet coat and the edges and all that stuff looks like. You just need enough compressor to keep that paint wet to get that whole coat down. You don't want to stop in the middle. Okay, so the basic car paint job can be broken down into 8 steps. And those 8 steps are these. Number 1 is the strip down. We're talking about pulling all the paint off down to either the last bare coat or last good coat of paint or to bare metal. And then we're looking at metal work. Step 2 is the metal work. Whether we're cutting rust or pulling dents, the metal work. Step 3 is your filler work. And then step 4 is going to be the primer prep, followed by step 5, the primer application. And then step 6 is the paint prep, followed by step 7, the paint application. And then finally, step 8, which is going to be the cut and buff. Those are the 8 steps that we can break down a paint job into, and this series of videos is probably going to have 7 or 8 videos. We're going to do one video on each one of those steps to show you how to get it done step by step. Alright guys, we're going to call that a video here and wrap it up on the video part 1 in our series of how to paint your car at home on a budget. Today we went over the products that I chose to go with. We're shooting a single stage paint, HVLP on the color, the super duper cheap Harbor Freight siphon gun for the high build primer, and we went over and looked at the car, and I've laid out all the specifics on how we're going to shoot this car. Remember, you got a lot of options when you do this. If you're budget minded, just think far ahead as you can and really kind of figure out what product's going to be best for you. So TCP single stage acrylic urethane for me. It's going to keep the budget low. It's going to be a nice durable finish. I'm excited to get the paint on this car. Next video coming in this series is going to be strip down, how we prepare the initial strip down of the body for metal work. So we're going to break this down into that many videos. So it's probably going to be like 8 videos. So make sure you come back, hit like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these videos in this series, and get involved in the comments, guys. I'm not a professional car painter, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm just here to show you that we can do this at home. We don't need to get our cars locked in paint prison for 5 years, and we don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars to paint these cars at home and have good, decent, drivable results. We just don't. We can do this at home. So follow along and get involved in the comments. Let's chat. See you soon on the next one for the strip down. Give me a couple weeks. We'll probably get it out. Super busy. Got a lot of stuff with the holidays and everything going on. So give me a week or 2. Then we'll get into the strip down video and talk about how we prepare the metal for the next step on the paint job series at home. Thanks, guys. See ya.